Now, if you're a high earner, there's something called tapered annual allowance, called hard facts that everybody needs to know in 2025. So the general rule, folks, is understanding your personal tax position is absolutely vital as far as retirement planning goes. So which is better? Well, in most cases, as I've said, the answer is. So you've probably heard that saving into a pension is the smart move for retirement, or maybe you've been told ISAs are the way to go because you can take your money out tax-free. So which is actually better? Should you in fact be using both? Or are you quietly setting yourself up for a shortfall in later life? Well, this is one of the most common questions people ask us, and the truth is, the answer is rarely either or. But what you do choose could mean the difference between retiring comfortably or running out of money halfway through it. So in this video, we're going to have a chat about pensions versus ISAs in plain English. No jargon, no waffle, just, well, maybe a bit of waffle. Just the cold, hard facts that everybody needs to know in 2025. So let's get into it. Now, you might think you have to choose between a pension and an ISA. You don't. They aren't rivals, they're tools and can be very good friends actually. And the most financially secure people, well, they use them both. So what on earth is a pension? Let's start with that one. Well, pensions are designed primarily for the long term. In most cases, you can't access your pension until you reach the age of 55, and this minimum access age is set to rise to 57 from the 6th of April 2028. The real benefit of pensions lies in how the government rewards you for saving. When you contribute to a pension, you'll receive tax relief, which effectively boosts the value of your contribution. If you're a basic rate taxpayer and you contribute £800 from your take-home pay, that'll be topped up automatically by HMRC with £200 in tax relief. So that gives you £1,000 in your pension pot, and if you do the maths, that represents a 25% uplift on your contribution. It's 800 times 1.25, gets you to 1,000, hence the 25%. Now, if you're a higher rate taxpayer, you can claim back an additional £200 through your self-assessment tax return, reducing the effective cost of that same £1,000 contribution to only £600. And again, if you do the maths, this means you receive a 66.7% effective increase on what you paid in. Now, for additional rate taxpayers, the total relief available can be even higher. On a £1,000 gross contribution, up to £450 can be reclaimed in tax relief, meaning it effectively costs you just £550 for that £1,000 contribution. So, when you contribute to a pension, you are not just saving your own money, you're using the tax system to significantly boost your retirement pot. Now, if you're employed, your employer will likely be contributing to a pension as well. Thanks to auto-enrollment rules, most employees are entitled to employer contributions, which amounts to extra money for your future that you could be missing out on if you're not participating in your workplace pension scheme. And if you ask me, that would be foolish. But here's the catch. Pensions, of course, are extremely tax efficient. You receive tax relief on your contributions, and any investment growth within the pension is free from income tax and capital gains tax. However, when you begin to withdraw money from your pension, not all of it will be tax-free. You can normally take up to 25% of your pension pot as a tax-free lump sum. That's lovely. The remaining 75%, however, is treated as taxable income, and it's subject therefore to income tax at your marginal rate at the time of withdrawal. Now, for example, if your pension was your only source of income, then after taking a 25% tax-free lump sum, the first £12,570 of your remaining pension withdrawals would also be tax-free because it falls within your personal allowance. That's your personal income tax allowance. The next $37,700 would be taxed at the basic rate of 20%. So in effect, you've got about 50 grand a year you can take out and not be subject to higher rate tax. But anything above that would be taxed at higher rate or additional rates depending on the total amount of income you receive in that tax year. And this is one of the reasons why taking all of your money out of a pension in 1 year, which some people do insist on doing, is generally a terrible idea because of the amount of tax you pay in that year. This means that how and when you withdraw from your pension can have a significant impact on how much tax you pay. If you have other sources of income in retirement, for example, you might have rental income from some buy-to-let properties or holiday homes, and you might have a final salary pension, otherwise known as defined benefit schemes, or the state pension, of course, because you should get that eventually. These will will all count towards your total taxable income, and it could certainly push you into a higher rate tax band and increase the amount of tax you pay on your pension withdrawals. So the general rule, folks, is understanding your personal tax position is absolutely vital as far as retirement planning goes. Managing your withdrawals very carefully can help you make the most of the tax advantages which pensions do offer and avoid paying more tax than necessary, and we all want to do that, I hope. Now let's talk a bit about ISAs. ISAs are pretty simple and flexible. There's not normally tax relief on the way in, with one exception, and I'll cover that in a second, but everything you earn inside an ISA, whether it's interest, dividends or capital gains, that's completely tax-free. And when you take your money out, well, that's tax-free too. So in a standard ISA, you can save or invest up to £20,000 a year, and you can access it whenever you like. It's your money and therefore your rules. Now you can also invest in cash or stocks and shares, typically via funds. And special mention though to the lifetime ISA, let's call her Lisa, which gives you a 25% government bonus on contributions up to £4,000 a year if you're under 40. You're turning £4,000 into £5,000 every year. These are designed to be used for a first home or your retirement, in which case you can then take the money out tax-free. But if you use it for any other purpose, you'll face a 25% penalty. Now in effect, that's the government taking back the bonus that they gave you. Now for any parents or grandparents watching, pay attention. These are excellent ways to help your kids save for their first home. You give them £4,000, they put it into Lisa, and they get £1,000 off the government. Nice. Now let's switch back to pensions, into which you can contribute up to £60,000 a year or 100% of your income, whichever is lower. And even if you earn less than £3,600 a year, or you don't earn at all actually, or even if you're a child, you can contribute £3,600 gross, which means £2,880 from your own resources into a pension, and the government will top it up to that £3,600, which is really nice. You can do that up to age 75, and so they're a really useful tool for those of you who are retired with spare savings or income. Now if you're a high earner, there's something called tapered annual allowance. This means that you might not be able to contribute the full £60,000, so it's worth checking if this rule applies to you. Now for ISAs, you can contribute up to £20,000 a year across all types, whether it's a cash ISA, a stocks and shares ISA or a lifetime ISA, but the maximum you can contribute to all of those things in any one tax year is £20,000. Right, let's take a bit of a look at a real life case study. Sarah is 35, she's a self-employed graphic designer and she earns £34,000 a year. Now for the past 5 years, she's been contributing £300 every month into a stocks and shares ISA. She values the flexibility it offers, using it as a combination of emergency fund, house deposit savings and a long-term retirement pot. Whilst this all-in-one approach works for her needs, in her head anyway, it's important to recognise that stocks and shares investments can go down as well as up. I think can should probably be turned into will, because stocks and shares do go up and down in value. Now this makes them potentially unsuitable for short-term needs such as emergency savings or an upcoming home purchase, where capital protection is often more important than investment growth, because you don't want to be having to take money out of a stocks and shares ISA at a point where the market's just crashed. That would be bad news. Now James is 37, works full-time as a marketing manager, salary of £45,000. He contributes 5% of his salary into his workplace pension, and his employer contributes the usual and additional 3%. Now recently, James started working with a financial advisor to refine his approach to saving and investing for the future. This support has helped him take a more strategic view of his finances, which sets his situation apart from Sarah's. So who's better off? Well, Sarah's saving regularly into her ISA, which is good, and it's growing free from income and capital gains tax, also good. However, she's missing out on one important benefit: tax relief, and that's what's available on pension contributions. As a basic rate taxpayer, she could receive 20% tax relief on any pension contributions, which means for every £80 she contributes, HMRC pop 20 quid in, turning it into £100 before the funds are even invested. So for someone in Sarah's position, she's self-employed, remember, she hasn't got access to a workplace pension. A self-invested personal pension, a SIP, or just a very good personal pension might be a suitable solution. This will allow her to benefit from the tax relief which I've just explained, whilst it still maintains a wide choice of investment options. Pensions are typically not accessible until age 55 and 57 in 2028, as I said earlier, so they're more appropriate for long-term retirement planning than for short-term financial needs. Now, James, by contrast, is already benefiting from both employer contributions and tax relief on his own contributions, which is excellent. His workplace pension receives ongoing contributions that are enhanced immediately by the government and his employer. And by working with a financial advisor, James is also gaining tailored insights, ensuring his pension strategy reflects his risk profile, which is really important, and that might change over time as well, his investment goals and his retirement timeline. And obviously we'd like to think he'll be bringing that forward by getting some excellent help with his decision making. Now, his advisor's helping him monitor performance, really important, adjust asset allocations where appropriate, and plan to draw down an income in retirement in a way that minimises unnecessary tax. Now, there are still areas where both Sarah and James can actually improve. Sarah could definitely benefit from separating her financial goals more clearly. Her emergency fund would probably be better placed in a cash ISA, which would be risk-free and easy to access, rather than a stocks and shares ISA where the value will fluctuate. Of course, you can mix and match with ISAs. You can have your emergency fund in a cash ISA and your longer-term savings in a stocks and shares ISA. That's a good strategy. But you should absolutely consider using a pension for a longer-term retirement goals, because that'll give her access to tax relief and allow her savings to grow more efficiently over time. So speaking to a regulated financial advisor could help her put together a plan that strikes the right balance between flexibility and tax efficiency. James is already in a really strong position, but there are still opportunities to optimize further. As his income increases or as pension rules change, for example, his advisor will help ensure that he remains within the annual allowances and continues to contribute tax efficiently. He may also benefit from opening an ISA alongside his pension to give him access to flexible tax-free funds for medium-term goals that fall before his retirement age. And of course, if he happens to save too much into an ISA and his pot gets too big, his cash ISA pot gets too big, he can also cream a little bit off the top and pop it in his pension. So this kind of diversification can really help balance long-term growth potential with access when needed. It's a nice balancing act and it's really important. So both Sarah and James should ensure they are aware of the charges associated with their investment platforms and the underlying investment funds as well. Over time, high fees can have a significant impact on net returns, especially if they aren't generating high returns. So you have to make sure you get good value. Now, diversifying their portfolios across different asset classes, you've got UK and global equities, you've got bonds, corporate bonds, government gilts, those kind of less risky investments, and possibly other investments as well, will all help manage risk and smooth out performance during the world's ups and downs, of which there are many. Now, most importantly, they should review their financial plans very regularly, at least once a year. Circumstances and goals will of course change over time, and it's really sensible to reassess investments at least once a year to stay on track. So Sarah and James are both making an effort to save and invest for the future, which they should be pleased about, but their approaches highlight the importance of choosing the right tools for the right goals. So whilst Sarah values flexibility, she's definitely missing out on some valuable tax perks. James, on the other hand, is making great use of his workplace pension and professional advice, which is helping him stay aligned with his long-term objectives, that is. Now, this comparison shows how the right strategy, especially when supported by expert guidance, can lead to more efficient and confident financial planning. So how can financial advice make a difference? Well, James is already making smart moves by working with his advisor, because with expert guidance, he's optimizing his tax planning, he's maximizing his pension contributions, and he's structuring his retirement withdrawals efficiently, or at least getting ready to do that. Having a professional in his corner means he can stay ahead of ever-changing tax laws and pension rules, of which there are loads, making the most of every available opportunity. Now, Sarah, on the other hand, she's self-employed, and she could also massively benefit from financial advice. An advisor could help her set up a pension for a start. She could develop a tailored investment strategy and strike the right balance between ISA and pension contributions. That'll help her build a stronger, more resilient savings plan for the future. And in particular, because she's been saving into an ISA already, she's got a bit of a pot there. She doesn't need it all for emergency funds. She can basically take some of that, pop it into a pension, and then she's kick-started her retirement plan, which is great. Now, if any of this feels relevant to you, we are here to help. And at Reeves, we've got a free financial review available to you. It's valued at over £800. We'll take a deep dive into your finances, we'll explore where you are now, and work with you to create a clear, practical roadmap for retiring on your terms. There's no pressure to become a client either, folks, just honest, expert advice that can genuinely make a difference difference. So please click the link in the description or hit the button on screen to get started. Now the bottom line here is Sarah and James are both saving for the future, but their approaches are very different. James is actively optimizing his pension with the help of a financial advisor, while Sarah is still relying primarily on her ISA. Both could improve, both could diversify their saving strategies and consider how pensions and ISAs work together to provide flexibility, tax relief and long-term growth. For Sarah, it's about balancing flexibility with the tax advantages, which she's not doing particularly well at the minute. And for James, it's about maximizing his pension and ensuring his future withdrawals are tax efficient, but also having a wee pot, probably in a cash ISA, in case something goes horribly wrong because he's forgotten to do that. The situations highlight how different savings tools can serve distinct purposes, whether it's flexibility now or tax advantages and benefits later. But no matter what your approach is, understanding what happens when you eventually retire is crucial to making the most of both ISAs and pension, because they are very good friends. So what happens when you retire? You're entitled to take 25% of your pension pot tax-free, either as a lump sum or in stages, and the remaining 75% is taxed as income based on your personal tax rate at the time of withdrawal in that particular year. Once you access your pension, you have a range of options for how to use the funds. You can buy an annuity to receive a guaranteed income for life or a set period of time. There's loads of different annuity options out there at the moment. Or you can go down the more flexible route in something which we call Flexi Access Drawdown. That keeps the money invested and you can withdraw it as and when you need it, usually a proportion of the tax-free cash and a proportion of the taxable pot, to try and get you as much of your money out of your pension tax-free completely for as long as possible, with a mix of the two. I'll explain that in a different video probably. Now each option has rules and implications for your tax position and how long your money will last. With ISAs, you can withdraw money at any time without paying any tax, as there is no income tax or capital gains tax on withdrawals. If your ISA is a Flexi ISA, you can take money out and replace it within the same tax year without affecting your annual ISA allowance at all, which is £20,000 for the 25-26 tax year. So this flexibility makes ISAs a really useful complement to pensions, providing accessible tax-efficient savings that can be used before or alongside your pension when you come to retire. And when you die, let's talk about that. It's a big question that often gets swept under the carpet because we don't like to talk about it, but we must. What happens to your money when you die? Let's start with pensions. If you die before the age of 75, any money left in your defined contribution pension can usually be passed on tax-free, whether that's as a lump sum or an income. Now currently it also doesn't count towards your estate for inheritance tax IHT purposes. That's provided it's paid out within 2 years of your death. And this makes pensions a highly tax-efficient way to pass on wealth. If you die after the age of 75, the money can still be passed on, but your beneficiaries will pay income tax at their marginal rate when they withdraw. The pension still does not count towards your estate for IHT under the current rules, but the income tax liability makes timing and planning very important. Now, not all pensions offer the same flexibility. For example, defined benefit schemes or final salary schemes, they may have more limited death benefit options. In fact, they usually do. Sometimes what you get is a survivor's pension, a spouse pension, or your dependent children might get something. It's typically 50% of what you were receiving or would have received if you weren't taking benefits from it. So you've got to check your scheme rules and keep your nomination of beneficiaries up to date at all times. Now let's look forward a wee bit. As of today, the time of recording, there's no confirmed legislation in place that makes unused pension pots subject to inheritance tax from April 2027. This idea was suggested in a 2023 Treasury review of pension tax treatment and were proposed in the autumn budget last year. So you should definitely be considering how to plan effectively to avoid inheritance tax, but it's not currently law. Now, as for ISAs, the rules are different. When you die, your ISA stops being tax-free and its value becomes part of your estate. If you're married or in a civil partnership, your surviving spouse or partner can inherit your ISA allowance in its entirety, along with all of the money in your ISA, and that's through something called an additional permitted subscription, an APS. Now this allows them to retain the tax-free benefits even if the ISA itself is transferred as cash or investments. If you will your ISA to somebody else, for example your children, it simply becomes part of your estate and may be subject to inheritance tax depending on your total estate and available IHT allowances. Now they won't pay income tax or capital gains tax on receiving it, but they won't inherit the ISA tax wrappers either going forward, unless they use the money to fund their own ISAs. So whilst pensions pensions currently offer powerful inheritance tax advantages, especially before the age of 75. It's important to stay informed because the tax rules are forecast to change. Now, ISAs may be less generous in tax terms, but they're often simpler to understand and manage, which can be helpful for your loved ones at a particularly difficult time. So, which is best? Well, pensions and ISAs each offer different tax benefits, and for many people, the best approach is to use both, depending on their needs, of course. So, pensions provide tax relief on contributions, which is especially beneficial for higher rate taxpayers. For example, I'll say it again, £800 into your pension, the government adds £200 in tax relief, making it £1,000, and then if you're a higher rate taxpayer, there's another £200 you can claim back through self-assessment. Self-employed individuals also get tax relief, but don't have employer contributions. Pension savings grow tax-free whilst you're building them up, and you can usually start accessing your pension at age 55 or, as I've said, 57 in a couple of years' time. You can take 25% tax-free with the rest taxed as income when you withdraw it, and this could push you into a higher rate tax bracket depending on your overall income in retirement. Now, ISAs on the other hand don't give you tax relief on contributions, but all growth inside an ISA is tax-free and you can withdraw money at any time without paying tax. The annual limit for ISAs is £20,000. There are different types like cash ISAs, stocks and shares ISAs, and lifetime ISAs, leases as we said before. And leases offer that 25% bonus on contributions up to the maximum of £4,000 a year if you're under 40, with conditions on when you can withdraw the money. So which is better? Well, in most cases, as I've said, the answer is both. Both are better. Pensions are great for long-term retirement savings, especially if you benefit from employer contributions or tax relief. They aren't as accessible before retirement, but they have significant advantages for long-term growth. ISAs, on the other hand, provide flexible tax-free savings and are really useful for medium-term goals or as a tax-free income source in retirement. So using both really allows you to balance accessibility and long-term savings, making it easier to manage your money effectively before and after retirement. Now, if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe. Drop any questions in the comments. We aim to reply to every single one. And if you're curious about how to manage your retirement income once you start withdrawing, please make sure to check out our next video on annuities versus drawdown. We'll break down the pros and cons of each to help you decide which strategy might be right for you. So click here and I'll see you all there.